Topic. I am going to have to work really hard today to make this somewhat fun. Right. I've got Patty here and Liz here, so that'll help. This is a pretty heavy topic today. We're going to talk about the Kansas Open Meetings Act and the Kansas Open Records Act. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, not the whole statute, but we're going to talk about things that are specific to public library boards. And then we're going to share some, thank you, Patty, some awesome resources with you um, in case you don't remember what's on this Zoom. But one of the things we're going to be doing is, as always, this meeting is being recorded and it will be archived. And one of the things we're starting new this year is you'll be able to access the slideshow again. And of course, after this Zoom, if you have questions about anything, please don't hesitate to contact us. We work for our library boards, and we love the work we do. We thank you for volunteering in your community. I usually save it to the end, but I'll say it now. I feel it strongly that library board members are some of the most important volunteers in your community. The reason for that is that there aren't many other boards in Kansas that have actual laws to govern how you work. Library boards do have laws, and it is CKLS's job to help you keep it legal and to help you find the easy button. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get us started here. I just will share my desktop, I think. Okay, and I am going to start the slideshow. You should be able to see this now. This trustee training is for Kansas Open Meetings Act, Kansas Open Records Act, special meetings, and executive session. This little URL here is going to link you to the CKLS resource guide that just talks about this stuff. You're going to find a wealth of information there. You'll also find the a citizen's guide to open government workbook. And if you would like that, have your librarian contact CKLS and we can print out a bunch of copies for you and send them off through the courier to your library. They are very helpful. But again, today we're just going to talk about the specifics that deal with public libraries. Okay. I want to move you to, I don't know where. I've got the pictures are all over the place. There we go. Okay, that'll work. That's what I wanted. The Kansas Open Meetings Act, we call KOMA, and the Kansas Open Records Act, called KORA. These are laws that guarantee citizens the right to know what's happening with their government tax dollars, specifically how those entities that receive tax dollars are using those dollars. And so in the Central Kansas Library System, all city, district, and township libraries are funded with local tax dollars and must comply with KOMA and KORA. The Ellis County has established by vote a county library, and they've appointed a board, but they haven't actually started the work of the library. Now, it's important to note that KOMA and KORA are not the same thing as Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order generally helps you, it helps guide you through the structure of the meeting. KOMA and KORA also does not require an agenda, and Robert's Rules doesn't either, but I highly suggest an agenda because otherwise you really don't know what you're doing in a meeting, and the agenda actually helps you refer back and find things rather quickly if you need to go backwards. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to unmute your mic. If you have a question that's a little bit more confidential in nature, you can in the chat type directly to Liz or Patty, and they will read it out without identifying you or your library name. And our goal is not to judge anything that may not be being done correctly, but to help you understand why it should be done correctly, but also how to do it easily. I think that's an important part of what we're here for tonight, and an important part of what CKLS does as well. So the Kansas Open Meeting Act, we're going to talk about what is a meeting, because actually that is defined. What are serial meetings? The proper way to go in. Somebody's not muted. In and out of executive session, violations of the Kansas Open Meeting Act, and special meetings. I want you all to pay extra special attention when I'm talking about serial meetings. So KOMA covers meetings which are defined as a gathering or an assembly with the following characteristics. The first one is really important. It occurs in person or through the use of a telephone or any other medium, say like Zoom, for interactive communication. That is a serial meeting. It involves a majority of the membership of an agency or body and is for the purpose of discussing the business or affairs of the body. That's pretty clear. I'll move on. Serial meetings are in what I call a serious violation of the Kansas Open Meetings Act. So this can be a quorum, the majority of the board, gathering at one time, say at a church potluck, or in a serial face-to-face, by telephone or by email, to discuss a specific issue with the intent of reaching agreement on a board action. Okay, what does that really mean? That means that if your librarian sends you a text message that reminds you about trustee training tonight, but she sends the message to everyone on the board, and you reply to everyone, and 2 or 3 other people reply to everyone, you've just broken the Open Meetings Act because you've reached agreement on an action. Now, that's a really mild example. A more serious example would be board members talking about a board issue, and it can be as mundane as who's baking brownies for the bake sale, but it could also be as serious as, I see this item is up on the agenda. How are we going to vote? It can also be talking about personnel issues, just texting back and forth, saying, I really didn't like the librarian's presentation. I don't think that the agenda was properly prepared and the bills weren't ready. We need to talk to the librarian about this. That is a very serious violation. So when Facebook Messenger and text messages make this way too easy for board members to slip into this very slippery slope of KOMA violations, you easily run the risk of violating the Kansas Open Meetings Act. And a part that most people aren't aware of here is that personal cell phones and devices can be subpoenaed during a violation investigation. It's much better to be paranoid about this and never text one another or never message one another, have anything to do with library business whatsoever. It's okay for one person to send out the, don't forget there's a meeting tonight, because that's normal, but don't be replying to all. If your librarian does that through an email, when I'm messaging my board, the executive board, the very first thing I say is, do not reply all to this message. If you have any questions or comments, just reply to me and I will then share them out with the group. That really has helped prevent any of these violations for us through serial meeting. Any questions so far? Okay, most of you have already gone once or twice or more, if you've been on the board for a while, into executive session.
I have a question. Sorry, Gail.
Yes, no, please.
So we have those Kansas statutes that say a meeting is a quorum, but
A
there's also
majority of the board, right?
okay. There's also an attorney general's opinion that it's actually a majority of a quorum to
Yes,
be considered.
not in a whole quorum, three or
Yeah.
more,
So
right?
yeah, it's three or more.
Right. It's pretty serious. They when Derek Schmidt was the attorney general, he really cracked down on this. And it's not just public libraries that are subject to this. School library boards have recently been fined. Every single school board member, if they violate, every single board member, if they violate the Kansas Open Meetings Act, can be fined over $100. It's a
And it's
lot, and libraries don't have that to pay. And
and it's
most
not
board
just
members don't have that either.
big schools or big library board.
Right. These are small town entities that are getting the fine slapped on them. Okay. So I'll go back to executive session. Most of the reason that your library board will go into executive session is to talk about salary increase for your library workers or to do an annual evaluation for the director. There are other reasons as well, and that is attorney-client privilege consultation. You could, if you're speaking with an attorney about a legal issue, that would be an executive session, and a preliminary discussion to buy real property. So if you are preparing to expand your library and the lot next door is open, that's what the real property is, and discussing specific minors. Discussing specific minors really is more about school boards. Um, we see that sometimes library boards want to talk about minors who are misbehaving in the library in executive session, and we don't recommend that. We recommend that that be discussed in open session, but that individual names should not be mentioned. If it's a chronic behavior problem, your library director will share that with you and share the steps for remediation. She's probably going to share that she's talked to CKLS about this as well. And then CKLS can advise you, but you don't go into executive session for that. That any other reason you really don't go into executive session. It's kind of tricky because that means you talk about everything in the public and open, and your discussion goes into the minutes. But that's how it's supposed to be when you are a tax supported entity, as the library is. So CKLS has created a template for you to go into executive session. Let me show that to you. We love it. You should be able to see this now, but it's awful small, isn't it? Um, Gosh, I have to move this now to move that. Um, how do I make it bigger? It's view. There it is, 100%. Let's see. Okay, this is better. I hope you can see this better now. Um, this template actually quotes the law right here, and it talks about the different reasons, and it talks about the steps you need to take. Here are the justifications, but here's the template. And this makes, oops, let's fix that. Keeping track of executive sessions for your recording secretary much, much easier if they use the template. And we just make sure we've always got several of these ready and in our board binder that we bring to meetings. The motion shall be made as followed: the governing body and the date. I move that we go in session to discuss, and then you would talk about one of these reasons here, which, oh, sorry, I'm pointing. Non-elected personnel, consultation with an attorney, acquiring real property. And then it would be the statutory justification. And then the open meeting will resume where at this time. Okay, so let me come back here. Yes, there, worked like magic. And so to go into executive session, you first have to start in an open meeting. The board has to move, and the motion needs to be approved to go into executive session. You need to, before you go in, state the time, how long you'll be in executive session, the time you will come back out, and where the meeting will come back out. And we usually say right here. Now, the board, say you go into executive session for 20 minutes to talk about a salary increase for non-elected personnel, you could say. So the board talks about it in 10 minutes and they don't have anything else to say. The board can come out of the executive session early, but you may not restart the meeting until the time that you stated. And that is because if someone was there and you have a one-room library, they would have to leave or go outside, sit in their car. And then they're expecting that the meeting will start 20 minutes after you went in. You can't start your meeting. You can come out early, but you just can't start. So if that 20 minutes is up and your board wishes to continue in executive session, 20 minutes was not enough time. You're evaluating the director and you want to talk about it longer. Then you need to start all over again, and you need to, with a motion, you need to say how long you'll be in executive session, what time you'll come out, and where you will come back out at. And here is a fine enough answer for that. Then you go back in. Sometimes if you're talking with a lawyer about something, or sometimes you may be visiting with CKLS, you may come in and out 2 or 3 times, and that's okay. So if you come out early, as in our first example, you said it would be 20 minutes, but it just takes 10. At the end of the 20 minutes, that's when you come back into regular session, and that is done with a motion. And so I move that we move back into regular session. I second the motion. All in favor, aye. You're back in regular session then. At that point, including that motion, your secretary starts taking minutes again. Nothing from the executive session is added to the minutes, except for when you went in, the topic, and when you came back out. You cannot vote in executive session because that wouldn't be transparent. That wouldn't be an open vote. That would be a closed vote, which we're not allowed to do. However, you can come to consensus during the executive session, and your board chair can say, okay, we've discussed the salary range. We're in agreement that we would like to offer our library workers a 3% cost of living increase. Do I have a consensus? And everybody shakes their head yes. Then you're done. You come back out into regular session. Let me move on. Oh, that's okay. You come back into regular session, and at that point, someone could make a motion to award the library workers a 3% cost of living increase. That would work. And then that is, of course, noted in your minutes. Any questions? I'm going to go back because I want to go back one. And I don't know where I'm at over here. Executive session. There it is. Okay, there was something here that I'd forgotten. And thank you for being patient with me. So part of what also needs to be recorded is who attends your meetings. If you have guests, they need to be listed. Which board members are present and which board members aren't. Those all go into the minutes. So if your librarian is attending the meetings, and your library director absolutely should and should be paid to do so, and the board wants to visit first without the library director about their annual evaluation for 20 minutes, The proper motion would be that I move to go into executive session for 20 minutes. We will reconvene at X time here, and we are going to discuss non-elected personnel. The library director will be dismissed from this meeting, from this executive session. Okay? So at that point, the library director needs to leave the room. And again, they may have to go outside and sit in their car and wait. But that way, then, if someone, any taxpayer in Kansas wanted to see those minutes, they would see that you did it properly. Now, a work session is very different. A work session is kind of like an informal board meeting, but no action is taken. This is when a board can really start talking about things. So say that you know you're supposed to evaluate your director every year, but you don't know what that's going to look like. You may hold the work session, and you might even invite Patty, Liz, or Gail in person or on Zoom to help you craft that evaluation. We're not talking about library business. We're talking about something that is allowed. When we talk about business, like if we were to say, okay, I move that we vote on this evaluation that we've crafted, that this be the one we use. That instantly is what would trigger the Kansas Open Meetings Act, and you couldn't do it. But you can certainly come to a consensus that says, we're very pleased with all of the additions that we've made. We really like this one. We will discuss it and make a decision at our next board meeting in open session. Okay? We're not making any decision. We're just creating a thing. But again, no decisions are made on that. Now, does anybody have any questions on this one?
Gail, give an example of something um, a little more routine that a work
Sure.
session might occur for.
Okay, so we've actually attended several. One librarian was getting ready to retire. She knew well in advance and had shared that with her board. And they wanted to sort of work on a direction for the library for the next few years. Essentially, it was doing the work of strategic planning for the future without using a formal structure or a formal document to do it. And so Patty and I went up to this library, and they had delicious snacks. But we met with that board, and we talked a lot about what's new in libraries, what's happening down the road, what we think potential threats are, and what we think potential opportunities are. This was when AI was just starting to make its way into libraries, and we all kind of figured that that would be an opportunity and potentially a threat. But we really had a lot of good discussion of what they see their town needing in the next 4 to 5 years as far as a library goes. And that was a very productive meeting. Do you have anything to say about that in specific, Patty?
Uh, I I found that type of situation. It took out it took out a little of the formality, but it also, because we were not in a regular meeting, people were a little more comfortable. They were a little more direct sometimes.
Yes, and
And
casual.
so,
Mhm.
work sessions and committee meetings are ways to get the
Preliminary
beginnings
work done.
the
Mhm.
beginnings of business done. So it's not uncommon for the board chair to appoint a policy committee to look over the policies
Mhm.
to bring that information back to the next board meeting. So
Yes,
it's not taking the entire board. Or sometimes there needs to be a facility evaluation or
right.
a program evaluation.
Mhm.
And so those committees can do some of the pre-work, and then they bring back
Their findings.
the findings, and then that's what goes reported in the minutes.
right? And it gets reported in the minutes when the committee reports back. And then if the board takes action on it, they do it after the committee's report and they're in open session. And I think that this is a very good way to be able to get some stuff done. I won't say work done, some stuff done outside of a regular meeting, but you need to be very careful about how this I'll say works. Okay, it's a pun and I'm terrible at them. One of the things that could also happen in a work session is if you wanted a special board training from CKLS, but you wanted it to be longer than a half an hour. Well, if it's longer than a half an hour, it's going to take up your whole regular meeting, and that won't really work. So it may be that your board determines to do it on a Saturday morning, and CKLS comes up and we do a couple hours of a work session and we talk about, whatever sorts of specific training your board is interested in. That's another example of a possibility there.
So I did get a private message
Yes.
about the minutes. And so the board chair can appoint a committee or can call for a work session, and that would be recorded in your minutes prior to that happening.
Yes.
And then when you come back the next month after that work session or committee meeting has occurred, that's when you record it
Report
in the
on it.
minutes and take any action.
Right. And the simple way to report on that would be in your agenda, a report of the committee to prepare a director's evaluation, or a report of the work session to craft a strategic plan or do the preliminary um, tasks of a strategic plan. And then with a simple couple of bullets, you would talk about what that discussion was. One of the things that we see is that secretaries try to do a really, really super duper good job on the minutes, but what they end up doing is really adding to the minutes a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be there. If you want a really good example of what minutes can and should look like, I'd recommend you ask your librarian to share with you what the CKLS Executive Board minutes look like. Everything is out in the open, but we don't have to list all the details and all the specifics on most things. Okay. So, I was a liar before. My goodness. It may be a fine of up to $500 per individual if a violation is found on a Kansas Open Meetings Act violation. If the circumstances show a willful disregard of KOMA, the Attorney General may impose that fine. The interesting thing about KOMA and KORA violations is that anyone may report those to the Attorney General's office. So if you've got, I'll just say, it's not like this has ever happened in real life, she says, speaking very sarcastically. You've got a very strong-willed board chair, and the board chair wants to do this and that, and they do it through email. And one of the board members has seen this and they said, we can't discuss this on email. This is a violation of the Kansas Open Meetings Act. And they persist in doing it. That is a willful disregard of KOMA. And should anyone, it could be a fellow board member, it could be the librarian, it could be anyone, turn that into the Attorney General's office. They can and will investigate that, and every individual on the board will receive that fine. They are dead serious about this. We have seen school boards in Southeast and Southwest be slapped with KOMA violations. We've
And
seen all
you know,
over. It's horrifyingly
and
scary.
it depends on the will and the basically who's sitting in the Attorney General's chair. Because
Mhm.
sometimes it will be the first violation
It's $100.
and
Yeah.
you may get the fine, or it might be you get a letter from the AG's office saying this behavior has been reported.
Cease and
And
desist.
and remember, if you get and I'm gonna be sarcastic like Gail was, if you get a smarty pants citizen who
Mhm.
is it present at your meeting. Again, we talked about that they need to be mentioned in your minutes as a guest. But if there's a smarty pants citizen who thinks that you have messed up, that person can easily just type in Kansas AG at kansas.gov and send that email. So
Mhm.
um,
And it
I'm
has happened when we do
I'm
have smarty pants citizens who are very concerned with the business of the library. I would say over concerned, but it is
and
their
I'm
legal
not
right.
saying don't shrink all the way back, but be aware of your behavior when there's a guest and when there's not. The behavior should be no
No
different.
different. Correct. Okay, I'm going to take this scary slide away. Oh, good. We're at the half point. So special meetings are something that's different. And nearly every time a library holds or needs to hold a special meeting, the librarian or the board chair calls me and I talk them through it. Special meetings. So I'm going to give a couple of different examples for this, but special meetings can be called at the direction of the president. If your bylaws say it can also, and or the library director, they could also call a special meeting. And if it is a written request of the majority of the board, then you can call a special meeting. During a special meeting, you do create an agenda, and on that agenda, you state why you're having this. During that, so the agenda will state where, when, and why. So it could be at the Cocker City Library Thursday, May 12th at 7 p.m. And we're going to discuss the broken front window. Okay. And ideally, they were able to put a 48-hour notice. Giving notice can be slapping a sign up on the door or or posting it on Facebook or your other social media channels and your website if you have one as well. Ideally, at least 48 hours. If that broken window was accompanied by a full-on disaster because of some sort of weather element, it very well could be that you don't have a front door to post it on. And ideally, you still can post that on social media or on your website. Natural disasters happen, and they are a case of emergency, and we do the very best we can. Um, when the special meeting is conducted, it is done the same way as a regular meeting. You open the meeting officially. You state the business of the meeting. And in this case, we're going to talk about the window that has blown out. That is the only thing you can talk about during that meeting. Now, when we talk about the window blowing out, one of the things we're going to talk about is how do we go about fixing that? We don't have anybody in our town. Does anybody know anybody from the next town over? How much money do we think we're going to need to pull out of our own fund for that? All those things having to do with that window can be legally discussed at a special meeting. You cannot say, well, we also noticed that the carpet needs repair and we're going to have to get that done. You can't do that unless it was part of that original agenda. Now, in cases of emergency with a special meeting, when you open the meeting, you could possibly amend the agenda to include the carpet, but ideally, you don't have to amend. You just state it in the agenda and you stick to that very clearly. Now, other reasons boards might go into a special meeting is because they need to. So recently we visited with a township library board, and they wanted to be able to talk with their township trustee the right steps for making sure that library board members get appointed. The township trustee couldn't meet during the regularly scheduled meeting, but they could meet on different day and time. And so the board chair visited with me and we called a special meeting, and we were very liberal with the agenda because we knew we were going to have to talk about governance and finance. We were going to have to talk about a lot of things. And luckily, everything that the board and the township trustee wanted to talk about was covered broadly in the agenda. The librarian had posted that 2 days ahead of time on the door and posted it on Facebook. So we've done an emergency situation, a semi-emergency situation that has happened in the past is it's been winter and the HVAC has gone out. The board knew it was kind of limping along, but it went out the week after a board meeting, and something needed to be done because it was very cold. And so the library director and the board chair visited, and they called a special meeting to discuss replacing the HVAC. At that special meeting, they were able to say, we want this company to do it. It was the only one in town. The librarian before the meeting had gotten bids on replacing the HVAC, and the board selected their preferred company to do it, and they approved the expenditure of that. That's all they talked about. They didn't talk about anything else. They directed the librarian to do this. They directed the treasurer to prepare a check after the work was done, and they closed the meeting. So I've given you three actually very realistic examples that have happened here. Any questions about special meetings? Don't
In
forget.
rare instances, we've been called to help them figure out how to do a special meeting in the case where it's October and the snowbirds have already moved south and they are the two signers on the
Yes.
account.
What do we
And
do?
so the librarian cannot pay the bills.
Right.
And so she can't bring things to the board because they don't have the right body. So they
To do
have to
business.
call a meeting to get new check signers.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's things that we don't think about, but sometimes that's where those special meetings fall into play. But if ever you have a question, that's why we give you our emails, because we're happy to answer those questions and we'll
Right.
talk you through it. And you
Right.
actually, what usually happens is you come to the answer on your own. We're just here to help.
Yeah.
We're just here to help you talk through it.
Another thing, if I can interject with
Yes,
special
please.
meetings, it says that you need to have a written notice. Well, the board can waive that notice in an emergency meeting.
Yes.
If you have no time, and you have to meet now, meet, and then at your next meeting, you get everybody's signatures saying that they waived the notice
Mhm.
because of the emergency situation.
Yes.
And we have the wording for that as well.
Yes,
And
exactly. Thank you.
so since you brought up time,
Mm.
I'm actually, reading the greatest book ever. I'm reading the KOMA KORA
Oh,
book.
you'll sleep
And
well tonight.
She's gonna sleep well.
Um, the myth, it says at least 2 hours notice must be given before calling a special meeting of
Yes.
a governing body.
Yes.
But the fact says the requirement exists only for cities of the second and third class. There
Right.
is no statutory time limit for other entities.
Yes. And so what we're doing here in this, and I should have said this at the beginning, we're not giving you legal advice. We're giving you guidance and what I call pre-legal advice to make you aware of those things, but we're not giving legal advice. We're giving you guidelines to run your library board. Yes, and you can't post a legal notice in paper if you don't have a building left.
Yep.
These things, they just happen. It's real.
And one other thing about special meetings is that if someone specifically requests notice, you do need to provide it.
Yes.
Yes.
So that means if Mrs. Jones,
Here's how it works is if Mrs. Jones says, I want to get the board packet and notice of all library board meetings, she submits that in writing for the next calendar year, the full 365 days. Mrs. Jones needs to get a board packet and notice of whenever there's a meeting. Hopefully, if you've got an emergency or a natural disaster, you'll remember Mrs. Jones asked for notification of meetings. At the end of that year, that 365 days, you are required to reach out to Mrs. Jones and let her know that year has expired. If Mrs. Jones does not submit in writing another request, then you don't have to do it. So any more questions about open meetings now that we've probably have you all nervous and shaking in your boots? But don't be, lead boldly as board members. Be aware that there are rules. And like I said, we've really tried to distill this down into the minimum information you need to know. Okay, if there are no other questions, I'm going to go on to our next super exciting topic, which is the Kansas Open Records Act, or KORA. We're going to discuss which records are exempt, what to do if you get an open records request, discuss charging fees, and what to do if your library doesn't have the requested records. This is something that could happen to a number of Kansas libraries. Okay, there are certain records that do not fall under under KORA, sorry, Kansas Open Records Act. I'll have to fix that. Library patron records and circulation records, what they have borrowed, is not something that you have to give away in the Kansas Open Records Act. That would include also any interlibrary loan records, because that is information that a patron is requesting. Don't have to give that away. And employee personnel files do not fall under KOMA and do not have to be disclosed. That includes performance ratings, annual evaluations, the hours they worked, their I-9, any other information. However, if someone wants to know how much a library worker makes, salary is a matter of public record. Now let's go back up to that top bullet about library patron records and circulation records. If your library is a Pathfinder Central library, it should bring you a great amount of comfort to know that the Central Kansas Library System actually owns Pathfinder Central. So what that means then is that our library board sets policies after discussion with libraries and things like that. We're not really a bossy boots about the owning, in quotation marks, of Pathfinder. The part that is good for your library, though, is that we do own the records for the books and the library patron records. And so if someone, and usually it would be a law enforcement officer, would request library patron records or their use of the computer or their circulation records because they're trying to find somebody or follow a paper trail, essentially. It's a cyber trail. They will contact your librarian. All the library directors know the law enforcement must go to CKLS for that. You do not need to handle that at your local level. CKLS takes care of that for you. If your library gets a records request, most often what I have observed happens in the past is the librarian calls and talks to me or one of the consultants to say, oh, I've got this really weird request. What do I do? And that's what we're going to talk about now. So the library board's responsibility in this is to appoint a records custodian. You would do that once a year in June when you do other paperwork. In most libraries in CKLS, this is going to be the library director. If you are a big enough library to have a business manager, it might be the business manager, but there are two of those and the rest of us are all, it's the director. If you get a request, and it can't really be a verbal request, someone can't come in and say, I want to see the board minutes from, 1979 to 1980. They need to put it into writing. That can be as an email. So if you receive that on a Monday, you have 3 business days to act upon or respond to the request. That means you let them know that the request was received. You will also let them know about how long you think it might to take to find it and to prepare it. Because unless they want to come in and look at them in person, they may request that you share those via email. And so if you receive the request on Monday, by Wednesday, your records custodian should have replied to the request to let them know where we are with this, how long you think it's going to take. Weekends and holidays are not included. You're only going to count your open library days. And so if your library is only open on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you get the request on Monday. Friday is the day that you would have to respond by. If they want to view these library board minutes from 1979 to 1980 in person, the library may require this to be done during regular library business hours, because if they want to do it outside of business hours, that means the librarian has to be paid those extra hours, and most libraries just don't have that in the budget. Now, here's a little bit about the scary part, is that the Kansas Open Records Act covers paper documents as well as any information in recorded form, that is, emails and digital documents and records. So you may actually recoup financially the time that was spent on your librarian going down to the basement and digging through all the boxes of old records and finding them. If they want to receive a print copy, you may charge for the cost of the printing and the time the library spent printing it. So right now you've got how much time it cost for the librarian to dig through, how much time it cost for her to copy it, how much time it cost for her to go over to the post office, and you've got the actual expenses of copying and mailing. And you can charge that fee to the person doing the request. And I think that in a smaller library, this is crucial to know, because it could take easily 10 hours to 15 hours to comply with a large records request. Well, that's your librarian's whole week. That's a lot of time for them. You, of course, are not charging to make money. You're charging for your actual time and your actual costs for copying. So the example I give here is if someone requests a record from CKLS and only the director has access to that record, CKLS could charge the amount spent at the director's salary. However, if the business manager also has access and the business manager does the actual work, that lower salary is the amount that should be charged. What you can also do before you do the work is you can give an estimate on the time and the cost, and you can let the individual who made the records request know that this is an estimate, a lowball estimate of what the actual cost for retrieving and copying and mailing that information would be. So this happens more often than you would think. What if the library doesn't have those board minutes from 1979 to 1980? Well, in case you didn't know, as a board member, actually, the board minutes are to be kept forever. However, we've had basements flood, we've had libraries burn down, we've had libraries blow away in tornadoes.
And we've had library boards who never bring back the book.
Right? Like a secretary never gave the book back when she died, and the husband threw him out because he thought it was junk. You sometimes have a new director who cleans up the place because it's a mess and we've got all this old stuff. This happens. Most often, if your
Don't
library,
panic.
yeah, don't panic, because we have a way to help you record this. If there's a large chunk of information missing and you know the time frame on it, contact us and we'll offer you guidance. You're going to be honest with your requester and say, we don't have these records. Our basement flooded or our house blew down. Now, what we recommend is, and we will write the wording for you to include in your next month's board minutes, is that we we learned that board minutes from 1979 to 1980 have gone missing and we don't know where they are. That covers the whole situation. Most often, if you've got a new library director and they go through the Apple program, which is just for new library directors by invitation, we find out what's missing. And at that point, then we prepare that statement for your board minutes and you adopt those in your next board minutes, and that covers you legally.
Now, I want to point out that keeping your board minutes for forever does not mean you keep your board packet for forever.
Correct.
There is a
What do they
retention
have to
schedule.
keep?
They have to keep financials. We say for 5 to 10 years, there's a retention schedule that we have, but you have to have your board minutes that are approved. Now,
Mhm.
some of you might not be doing this, and it's okay. You just start doing it now. Is that your minutes, when you approve them, you need to have them signed. Either the secretary or the president can sign after they've been approved.
Yes. Yes. And so, in your regular agenda, when you say approve the minutes of the previous meeting, at that point, somebody will sign. And so on our meeting minutes template that we also have that is amazing, I will tell you, it is amazing. There is a space right down below for that signature. And that way, then we don't skip it. Okay, this is our contact information. You've probably learned far more than you ever wanted to know about Kansas open meetings and Kansas open records. But it has been our responsibility to help you learn about that and to answer any questions you may have. You may always certainly contact us directly. If you don't know who you need or want to speak with, you can talk to our Lacey. She's our office admin, and she may ask you a few questions, but she will direct you to someone. And if that person isn't the right person, we'll get you taken care of. We're not so fussy as to get it right in the first phone call because, for goodness sake, sometimes we don't even get it right. What questions might you have about, we've got about 7 more minutes, about the Kansas Open Meetings Act, Kansas Open Records Act, executive session, and special meetings?
And feel free to unmute yourselves. You don't have to speak in chat.
Absolutely.
Hi, this is Lindsay Metcalf from Frank Carlson Library. I just had a question about the signed minutes. We've been signing them digitally, like
That's
I'm the
fine.
secretary. Okay.
That's just fine.
That's a dry signature. Wet signatures tend to be like the official thing, but dry signatures work too.
Dry signatures are, so when we talk about that, you have to keep your board minutes forever. A number of our libraries have started scanning those and keeping them in electronic form. If you choose to do that, we recommend that those be kept actually in several places. They should be on a hard drive. They should be kept somewhere in the cloud. Open up a Gmail account just for library board minutes. What gets to be a little tricky if your secretary is taking the book home she handwrites the minutes, takes the books home, and then types it back up and then brings it back, is sometimes it's assumed that the book can live at home, and the book cannot. If you only have 3 days to comply with that request, that information must reside in the library. The library secretary can certainly take it home, but then within 2 days, it needs to get back to the library. And the same information for what the treasurer might need to take home to compile the financial report, but then it has to come back because people can request not just board minutes, but they can also request your financial records. Now, this can be quite a problem if you get a concerned citizen, because it may be that they request your credit card statements for the year. Well, you've got account information on that. You're going to have to redact it on every single form. And in some instances, you may be buying I can't think of anything, so I won't give you an example there. But there's also going to be account information, maybe bank payment information. All of that stuff would need to be redacted before it gets shared.
They don't need to know that the librarian takes money in every day on the 13th or
Right,
anything like that.
right. They don't need to know those absolute details that could be more tempting to the regular citizen than it needs to be. We've gotten a couple of comments. Anything? Oh, we've got 23. What have we got? Thank Glenn Elder says it was very informative. Thank you. If you are still awake at the end of this, I congratulate you, because we know how dry this is. It is not fun stuff, but I'm retiring at the end of this year, and we decided we must do this for you, just to keep you out of trouble. And if you realize that your library board has been doing something all wrong, but you don't know where to start to get you on the right path, give us a call. We've helped libraries through this before, and we know the easy way to do it.
We're not going to judge.
No, we're not judging. We're always here to help, and we're going to help you move forward. Patty, go ahead.
So I put in the chat that we have 3 more trustee training sessions will be this summer. Those will be July 22nd through 24th. And I put some
Online.
topics in there for you. But also this week, just so you know what your librarians might be working on. And you're certainly welcome to attend any of these sessions. Tomorrow at 1:30, we will be doing a digital accessibility with Liz Duclos. On Thursday, we will be doing digital citizenship and online safety with the IT consultant from the Southwest Kansas Library System. On Friday, our Ashley Hernandez will be doing the latest in cool apps that librarians and library staff have sent to her for new things you might want to add to your phone.
And they
And then
probably aren't library adjacent.
No,
Cool
last year
stuff.
we did weather apps and star apps. And then next week, we have a library program idea swap on Thursday in Sylvan Grove. And then after that is the first of our Explore the Questions That Matter series. And that's a monthly series that allows for librarians and trustees to talk about the things that are on their minds.
Trustees
And
are welcome to any CKLS meeting.
we serve pizza and dessert at that one. So, join us for supper and stay for the conversation. And your library director can connect you to the host of CKLS events. But we would love to see your faces there, because you might learn a little bit more about the job that you've taken on, although it is a job with no pay. You might find a little bit better ways to connect with your librarian. And this does give you the opportunity for additional kinds of training.
Yes.
I will.
All right, go ahead.
I will make sure that the minutes template and the executive session template go out with the slides and the recording for this session. So
Yes.
Your librarian can get you that information. And we thank you for spending the evening with us. And we look forward to seeing you for more trustee training this summer.